She's lovely.
Thank you so much.
Much, much. Been said many times.
Maybe wait.
All right, everybody ready? No, not yet.
Yeah.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is now 6 p.m. This is the city council work session for the city of Bel Air Beach. Let's all rise and do the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Renee, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Bankard,
Present.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts,
Here.
Councilmember Kim Shaw Elliott,
Present.
Mayor Dave Gaddis,
Here.
City Manager Kyle Reefler,
Here.
and City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present. Thank you, Renee. All right, we have a couple of items that we're dealing with tonight. The first item is the code review chapters 70, 74, 78, 82, 86, and 90. Mr. Reefler, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're gonna run through these code chapters pretty much the same way we've been doing the last two work sessions, where we're just kind of mention things that stand out individually to take into consideration for when we bring back the recommendations. These chapters are relatively all short chapters, except for 86, which is the sign ordinance, and that has we included the old sign ordinance as well as the newest draft that we have. So I will pass the mic over to Mr. Serna to take us through these last remaining chapters.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. So yes, we will start with chapter 70, concurrency management. A lot of these, like Kyle said, are short, so I will just let everyone get started.
Well, I do have a question before we get started. You've reviewed this thoroughly, correct?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. Would you mind running through the recommendations that you're already suggesting?
Yes. Yeah, my notes at this point are in the form of handwritten notes on the hardcover of the book, so let me see. All right, so I've noted that Parks and Recreation, that's an optional item for concurrency management. No recommendation there, but just to let you know that you're not required to have a level of service standard for Parks and Recreation, and the same with transportation. And I know the Pinellas County has done some work where they've moved away from transportation concurrency into a mobility management system. So that's one of the recommendations that we're going to present relating to 70-7 proportionate fair share. That's outdated language. It doesn't conform to the county's recommendations for mobility management. And basically, I'm not sure how up you are on transportation concurrency, but it's a statewide system that does not work so well for built-out counties and built-out communities like Pinellas County. It basically says that if transportation's not there, then a developer has to come in and widen roads usually, which is not so easy to do in Pinellas County, not so easy to do in Bel Air Beach. So That's why, the county has gone away from that system. Basically, it's an impact fee, or it's like an impact fee when a development comes in and it trips a certain level, a certain threshold. It has to be a major development, so would not affect most things that you see here. It would come into play if somebody does a major redevelopment. Again, it probably wouldn't occur. I say probably wouldn't occur, but it could occur. So we're recommending that you have it in there. And then certain studies would have to be done if it tripped a certain threshold, and usually fees are paid as opposed to widening roads or things like that. A fee would go towards improving mobility, like sidewalks, bike paths, bus stations, things like that. So we're going to recommend that the city move towards that system. And again, like I said, it wouldn't come into play that often because if you're redeveloping, you can subtract the existing trips and you're only looking at net increase in trips. So this would only be like a major redevelopment where they're going to significantly increase traffic, which probably wouldn't occur. It would be a major development.
A
If
good
something like that would
example would be if we rezoned and built way up.
Yeah, if you're getting rid of single family, putting up a high rise, if that scenario would ever happen, then that would trip concurrency, or that would trip the mobility management system. And same thing with concurrency. You're probably not seeing developments that are tripping concurrency. But that's pretty much it as far as our comments on that. We did go through and check Florida statute references, and I think we're good there. But that's the bulk of my comments on chapter 70.
Mr. Weaver, did you have any comments on this section?
No, not for chapter 70.
Council?
None.
No? All right. Okay, please continue.
All right, then we could move to the next chapter, I'm assuming. Which is 74 floodplain management. Quite a bit more on this one. And this, like most communities, it's based on a model ordinance. And so we don't recommend major changes to that. Because you want to be consistent with the state requirements. There are some options that you can make for changes to your regulations. I think we discussed last time about significant improvements and how often those are tracked, whether it's once every 5 years, every year, things like that. But those are my comments on that. You're limited on what you can change or what you should change. Not up.
So I sent our current floodplain ordinance to the state for their review. It may take them a little bit, but we haven't had it done in a while, so I wanted to make sure that we were.
So your recommended change is no change?
My recommended change right now is to wait to hear back from the state. I do have I may want to recommend changing the definition of market value. Just kind of what a lot of other communities in the floodplain management are doing, but I want to get the consultation with the state first.
Okay. Council, any comments on 74?
About the flood, 5-year look back.
That was in our zoning
Yeah.
code.
Doesn't
We have
doesn't that mirror off of the 74 though?
It does refer back to it. But that section that we talked about, we drafted the ordinance and the planning and zoning board has already recommended it, so it'll be next meeting.
Good man.
What department does that go to at the state level?
FDEM, the Division of Emergency Management.
Okay,
Any time span that they'll get back to you?
I guess they're doing a lot with Broward County right now, and I was trying to get them to commit to the end of summer. But it might be a little bit later, but we have to wait till at least October 1st if we're changing.
We don't want them looking at us while they're thinking about Broward County. It's not a good idea. All right, any other comments or suggestions or questions about section 74?
Thanks.
No? All right. All right, please continue.
All right, the next chapter was 78, a very short chapter, one pager.
Mhm.
Entitled Planning, so, I think my only notes on this is we may want to, combine that chapter and move it to chapter 94. Just so it's all together, we're not sure it necessarily needs to be its own chapter.
Mr. Serna, just a question, Attorney Mora. Is it, and I'm genuinely asking because I don't know, is the existence of the LPA usually embedded here, or is it typically found like in other sections where you see the various boards created for a community like the planning and zoning board or the Board of Adjustment? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's typically under an administration section with other boards, and I think that's why I mentioned moving it to 94, because I think that's where that section is, and planning could be grouped with those.
So we'll look as we start to synthesize these things, we'll look to see where it fits best or where it's most natural. It's a little unorthodox having a board embedded as its own chapter. You have to provide for an LPA, but often it's done in the same breath as here are the boards we have. We have our Park and Rec Board, our Planning and Zoning Board, and our LPA. So it may just be moving it and putting it somewhere where you're more intuitive to find.
Makes sense? Council?
Agreed.
All right, continue on to chapter 82 then.
All right, 82, another very short chapter with dealing with satellite antennas. Not sure I don't have any notes on that. I'm not sure what the experience is or concern is. A lot of times when this section is in the code, it's outdated and dealing with the huge 5-foot satellite dishes, but this one seems to be more up to date, so.
I similarly had a question, having seen the code provision, as to where this chapter 94 addresses the kind of telecommunication tower that has been of most attention the last few years. This is specific to satellite antennas. I cannot profess that I have done any legal research on what the landscape is and our ability to regulate there, except to say, like Mr. Serna, I'm familiar with the outdated provisions. I can tell, growing up, I had a 10 or 12-foot black satellite in the backyard that we could, maybe point and get a channel from somewhere else. But I'm not sure if this continues to be an issue of concern in your community, or if the technology is such that it's always prudent to have the regulation if you think it's an issue. I just wasn't sure what you were, if there was an issue in this community that needed addressing.
Yeah, I read through this and it seemed perfectly reasonable to just keep it out.
Okay.
In front of your house. And does council mind if I call on Mark Beam?
Mark Beam, as far as the old satellites go and the old antennas, when it came to waterfront property, they were to be located in the center, mounted to the house. Now, there's still satellites available, but that would depend. That's Elon Musk's system that requires a satellite to be mounted on the house. So I don't know if you want to remove it, but I would kind of hesitate based on just that information. Or if somebody decides to put an antenna up, it designates waterfront and interior properties.
Since you've been here, Kyle, in any position, has there been very many or any permit requests
I've never had to deal with this chapter, but I think it's good to have
that is there,
in
right?
case, yeah. The one thing I brought up to Mr. Serna was, and I saw an example in the Pinellas County Code, is the glare coming off of the new solar panels.
Mm,
So there's actually code that prohibits from the sun hitting and glaring into somebody's window right next door and causing issues. So I thought that might be something we want to look at.
okay.
Does it make sense that we combine this with the antenna section?
Yeah, in my opinion, anyway, it might make sense to, rather than having a short chapter, to move it with 94 with other zoning district regulations.
Any other comments on this section?
Yeah, on section D, 2, the antenna shall be placed so that the integrity of the side lot setback shall be maintained at all times. And going back to what 94 we were talking about, those setbacks are encroached, I believe. And would this not trump what we just got ruled by the county?
No, that this is a different kind. This is applicable to this kind of antenna, a satellite antenna, not the telecommunications antenna of what's separately regulated there. So you're looking at this provision. It's so no, I would not read it that way. But that may highlight for us again, language that we would want to be mindful of, again, tempered still by the preemptions on amateur radio antenna and the authority I circulated following our last meeting saying your setbacks cannot be absolute when it comes to those kinds of antenna towers, not as to satellites, but as to the amateur radio.
Well, here's my issue that ham radio operators have all these leeways. Because for enjoyment of their hobby, and most of these antennas and satellites are the same thing. It's and
At the very least, as a legal fiction, they are not the same thing, right? They're
no, I'm not
separate.
talking about the device. I'm talking about the usage.
Right.
Yeah.
It's for two-way communications in the ham radio. Their whole purpose of that is for national security. That's why they've made special provisions for ham radio. If an EMP went off somewhere and suddenly everything's down, they can still fire those up and get them going. And that's why they've gone to great lengths to make sure that we don't kill them. Watching The View is another story.
But I think the feedback is still well taken. And as we look at these, as we combine and harmonize them, if there's provisions that we can incorporate as applicable to both, we'll certainly consider that.
I will say that bringing up Starlink, Viasat, things like that, that is two-way communication. And that's how I'm sure many people are now watching TV and they're talking to people on their telephones and everything else. That it's definitely something to take into consideration. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that here, but it's possible. Any other comments on this section? Are we making a provision for satellite two-way communication, or are we good with what we've got?
I'd like to at least look into if someone has got some newer code to address the technology today.
Everyone agree with that? We good? All right, the one that we've all waited for. Chapter 86, signs.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to jump to subdivisions and knock that out since it's the only one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
So we're jumping to chapter 90.
Chapter 90, yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll spend more time on the
And he already had his speech prepared too.
Nope.
and on subdivisions, I guess my only comment on that is you may want to consider adding provision for minor lot revisions and unities of title and lot splits that can be approved administratively, especially if they unify them and they want to come back in the future and then do away with the unity, that they don't have to go back through the subdivision process all over again. Not sure how often that occurs, but I just noted that there was not like an administrative approval for small lot adjustments, as far as I know.
Is everybody clear on what he was referring to there when he talks about like unity of title and division?
Yes.
I don't want to be patronizing, but I want to make sure because sometimes you can get lost.
So you're saying make it hard to join two properties, but make it easy to split them back apart if deemed necessary.
I don't know about the first part about making it harder, but just saying and allowing for administrative approval. If I own two lots next to each other and I say, hey, I own these two, I want to make them one. To be, as I understood, and Mr. Cerna, please correct me, as I understood, in either case, making those administratively approved, or did you just mean if you're undoing?
No, correct. Make them both administrative. Now, currently, they may be just unifying them through the property appraiser. Some places care about that and some places don't. But I would at least have a sign off administratively that the city has a record that was done and signs off on that. And actually, I think the property appraiser does require that on approval, there is a sign off from the city. So yeah. But once they want to undo it, not requiring them to go through a full subdivision process and platting and things like that.
Who has ultimate authority on signing off on this?
The county.
If it were to be administrative, I would work out with Kyle if he wanted to do it or designate somebody to do that.
Doesn't the county have the final say on this because it's in the tax? If you're combining two lots, that goes right to the tax appraiser.
Yeah, and they do have to get approval through the property appraiser. There is a unity of title form that they have, but it has a line on there, check that it's been approved by the city where you're located.
But what I'm saying is if the city doesn't approve it, then you can go to the county for a variance, can't you?
It's a function, there's an element of home rule involved here, where in some communities, if all it is we don't really opine on this, just go to the county, let them know. If in some cities, it may be, for example, if you have in your community a rule that says lots have to be at least 100 feet wide and 100 feet deep, and you unify your title, now you've got 190 square feet in each direction, and now I want to break them up. The city's going to say no, because you're creating a non-conforming lot. Your lots are not both going to be 100 and 100.
Right.
And so at that point, you would need a variance, but not at the county level. You need a variance at the city level to create a non-conforming lot. And most communities have a provision that says you can't do that. You can't get a variance for non-conforming lots, but it's an element of making sure you preserve the uniformity of your lot sizes and things, and people don't get cute with, land divisions and additions to cobble something together that doesn't conform. And that's a non-planner's exposition, but from a lawyer's standpoint, you're trying to, keep the aesthetic harmony and logistical harmony of what your lots look like and what their sizes are. So yes, the county has to approve it for tax purposes, but from a separate purpose, you may have a local control element. I think what Mr. Cerna is getting at is sometimes when you get these where there is no non-conforming lot issue and there is no variance, it's just, hey, I bought two lots, they're all the sizes you need. They're right next to each other. I want to build the two of them. I'm going to put a building right in the middle that's not going to be avoiding any setbacks. Making them go to a board, whether it's your planning and zoning board or your city commission, it's sort of perfunctory. Because you're asking them like, hey, can I have permission to do something that doesn't violate any issues in your code? I just need the city to sign off. I think what Mr. Cerna is getting at there is why put your board through that and in that weird position where they might say no just because they don't like the cut of his jib or something. I don't know. But getting at what is otherwise administratively resolved, what is otherwise a housekeeping matter administratively resolved.
But what if it's 3 lots?
What if, and again, that's all viable or all valid concerns, and you can draw that line, right? A combination of no more than X lots shall be approved in this manner. I think is the sort of thing he's getting at, is saying, you guys get to define the policy. He was just suggesting if it's creating any kind of undue administrative burden in the city or delay for that matter, you may wish to streamline it. Some communities do. I'm not advocating one way or the other.
I want to make sure I understand this. So let's say somebody combines lots and they want to build a big house. So if you're on First Street and you have a bunch of smaller homes, now you're going to have a giant home there and that doesn't require any extra approval?
Potentially.
Yeah, I mean, that is commonly done where they build a larger house and they build it in the middle of the lot. Now you could not, that's one thing that Kyle or whoever would check for if they decided to split it again. You couldn't split the house
And you have zero lot line.
Yeah, you couldn't do that unless they, but sometimes they do want to tear it down and build two houses again.
A good example would be, a guy bought the empty lot next to him because he didn't want a neighbor. And he has the option of merging those two together, but he already has a house there. He could, he just has a big yard on one side. Years later, he may want to break it apart because he's getting ready to leave and wants two lots. So he sells his house and he sells the lot separately.
Yeah, that one I understand. The difference is if they build a large home, is it then out of character with the rest of the neighborhood?
Well,
They can
character is defined by your land development regulations. So if your land development regulations allow that a house shall not be any taller than X and no further than Y from the setbacks, and they do all those things, then it's in character in that sense. Now, I understand it's not in character in the sense that it's next to a bunch of 3-2s built in 1994, but split house, but that's sort of, and that's what we're kind of discussing is, what.
We live in an AE zone, most of us, or a V zone, so FEMA's actually said what you just said. We're gonna build up, or you're not gonna build at all. And he can't even issue a permit. I mean, if you can't issue a permit on a flood, on a slab home today in this area.
No.
You'd have to be 10 feet or more above sea level,
gotta be
so.
built.
That's my whole thing, that we're gonna be losing the aesthetics of what this whole community is about, little homes with slabs like yours and mine.
Yeah.
The Golden Girls book.
Here we are. Even fit the definition now.
But I think I've seen some newer homes that have been built just recently. I mean, I guess FEMA will say the finished floor level has to be X.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily up on stilts. It just sometimes they'll just bring a lot of
The finished
fill.
floor
and
still has
pick
to
it
be
up.
above wherever
Correct.
the floodplain is.
Correct.
Usually that's 10 feet around here.
Right,
I think they're all building them around 12 or 14 now.
to be safe in case it changes.
Most people are selecting, to do the garage storage.
Well, the 10's 100-year, and I think the 500-year is over 12, or whatever, something like that.
Isn't there some kind of distinction between, like replatting versus unionizing two lots? And
Whether or not it's a platted lot or,
can't they combine lots and actually replat? Versus just unionize, and then I didn't understand if you're talking to the property appraiser. How much we could get involved with someone who's got a unionized lot, two lots unioned, and they wanna, break them back apart.
yeah, they do have a form similar where it requires sign off by the city.
Okay.
Because that's sort of what brought it to mind. We had a recent example and the discussion was, well, do they have to go back through the whole process? And the process in that community was, very cumbersome and required planning board, commission, and then platting. So, and they were already platted lots at one time. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you could set up a process where you could do it administratively, even if they were platted at one time.
Okay.
Any more questions or comments on this section? Or chapter rather, Mr. Bankert?
Better resident.
Oh, yes, sir.
Just, splitting lots and making two lots into one lot. You've got about 3 or 4 different things to think about. One is approaches that are in the curbs for the street and access to a driveway might have to be redone. Moving a street light might be another one. And the other two things, if you got 2 lots and go to one, you're gonna have 2 sewer taps and 2 water taps. I don't know what the county would require, but we had that issue many years ago. Where a sewer tap wasn't closed and it flooded back sewage around the house. So something.
I didn't hear the last part of that. You said the sewer, I didn't hear the last part of what you were saying. The sewer wasn't, it backflowed.
It was an older house torn down.
Okay.
And during the remodeling from the original to what was ever added on, they had 2 sewer taps. One side of the house was the new
Oh,
tap.
okay.
The second floor,
Mhm.
and that house was tore down. And you had an open line, it was never properly plugged.
Here it came, then.
Thank you, Mr. Beam. Any other questions or comments? All right, now we're moving on to. Yeah, right back to where we were. The sign ordinance. Yep. All right. Now we are up to chapter 86. Mr. Moore, I'm gonna turn the floor over to you.
So we're back to chapter 86 in the broadest sense. I look forward to hearing Mr. Cerna's input, should he have any on this. This is to me, this really comes down to a question of process and community preference. When I interviewed for this position almost exactly 2 years ago, at my interview, one of the first topics that was mentioned substantively and asked about competencies was about the ability to review and revise the city sign code. It was a stated priority. And after we dealt with some high immediate priority issues upon my being hired, one of the more substantive things we did was my firm did was prepare and circulate the attached sign ordinance. It was requested that we bring something to the council. And so our firm has written sign codes for other communities in Pinellas and elsewhere. And so we worked that template and adapted it as best we could to this community and said, okay, let's look at what your current code is, what the landscape is. And we provided a admittedly, very robust sign code. Before offering it, I did confer with Kyle on it to say, can you administer this? Do you have questions about it? He said I was comfortable, once you understood its flow. And so we put that forward. My feeling is always that I am not a policymaker in your community. You are the policymaker. So I offered you, here's the most robust approach. And understandably, in comparison to the previous draft or existing sign ordinance, the sentiment was this is a lot for a small community and a lot more than we presently have. Can we strip this down? And I said, sure, just tell me how. And so I think we're kind of back in the same place. If there's things that you feel are extraneous, tell me. We'll happily revise in a global sense so it's consistent. I will tell you one of the challenges, there are two challenges here. This amendment is not just like, hey, let's make a sign code. In 2015, the Supreme Court of the United States issued an opinion that said sign regulations have to be treated as all other forms of First Amendment speech regulation and therefore have to be content neutral. At the local level, for time memorial, communities had different regulations for political signs versus, real estate signs versus other forms of speech. And most especially, political signs are the one that come to mind. Okay, political signs can be out this long. You can have this many. The same isn't true for come run the 5K. And so that was how it used to be done. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't have that kind of dichotomy. It has to be content neutral. And that was a plurality opinion, which means that the Supreme Court did not have a clear 5-4 vote. It was, we get 5, but it's 3 this way, 2 that way, and you kind of cobble together what amounts to a majority opinion. And so there's been some case law since, but the plurality was not, it did not give an explicit, and this is how you do. And so a lot of communities have adapted in the format that you have here. The last thing I'll say to that is, what we've offered you is an attempt at anticipating every eventuality, some of which may never become eventualities in your community. And so as you look at your community, for example, you do not have a commercial district in Bel Air Beach. I'm keenly aware of that. Yet there's a lot of sign content in here about commercial signs. Well, one of the challenges you do face is you operate as a jurisdiction, a municipality in the state of Florida. Just in the last 3 or 4 years, the legislature preempted your ability to regulate home-based businesses to a large degree. And so if you were a home-based business, and we then have to get into a debate on, is this a commercial sign? Is this a residential sign? If Randy's going to operate his law firm out of his house and say, come here to get your will done, is that a commercial sign? Well, it's commercial in content, but it's on a residential property, lawfully operating a home-based business. This may give us a little bit of like, well, if it's this category, we treat it this way. If it's that, and it takes out some of the guesswork. Again, I say that to say I welcome your feedback. I want to be really clear. I know sometimes when you have a product you put before your client and it's met with, you know, some understood frustration or concern, I don't have, my feelings are not tied up in this. I just want to get you, as my client, what you want. And while I understand, at least this previous draft may not be what you want, tell me what it is, and I'll happily conform it to what this community needs and finds its needs to be. And that's what I'll say relative to the sign code.
Okay, I have a couple of questions before I go around and ask for other comments and questions. Your definition of overly robust, tell me exactly what that means for the city of Bel Air Beach.
Well, a few things. I think and when I say, for me, overly robust, or if you wanted to, I'm known in some of my other communities for analogies. This is sort of a Cadillac Rolls Royce of ordinances of here's every bell and whistle we could throw in, right? So I know just on the face of it, the number of whereas clauses are intimidating and frustrating to legislators sometimes, right? Like it's 30 pages of whereas clauses, but that's because we're operating in a somewhat fluid legal environment, trying to say we knew the authority when we adopted this, and giving you a rational basis to say, and we harmonized it all in this. Another thing is there's a list of prohibited signs. You could just say, here's the kinds of signs we allow. Anything not on this list is prohibited. But then you start getting into, well, is this meet that definition or this? So there's a long list of prohibited signs. And so there's different ways of doing that, to be sure, but that's the attempt at exhaustively addressing each possibility, I think, is where I get this being more overly robust. And I'm not wed to that language. It's just trying to come up with something that conveys that it is a longer ordinance and more ordinance than I customarily put before you.
And your primary purpose was to, in the event that a sign violation turned into litigation, that we could prove that we did everything we could to try to prevent this from happening.
Correct. I mean, I can't promise you the victory. What I can promise you is I'm trying to put us on footing to have a defensible position if challenged.
Right. And Mr. Riefler, you said that you would not have a problem administering this policy? And go ahead.
No, at first it was intimidating, but as I read through it and kind of pieced it in my mind of how to read it, it got easier.
And what about code enforcement? How do you think that they're going to, if, let's just say that we approve this, how do you think they'd be able to handle it?
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, code enforcement officer or one of the staff members bounce things off of me or ask me where.
And then a couple of, at least two council members have made a recommendation of possibly preparing a simplified book, because it seems like it would be a book to try to dumb this down a little bit. But you want to put up a sign. Here's your guide. Is that even possible?
Yeah, we could do something similar to the code enforcement brochure that we do, which is kind of simplifying all the language and putting it all in one place for the main things people want to know.
So I'm hearing you're actually pretty comfortable with what we've got. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Banker, you've been very vocal about this sign ordinance, proposed sign ordinance. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, I talked to Kyle a couple of weeks ago and I asked him how he feels about that. And he says he's comfortable. And I'm thinking, well, if he's comfortable, he's got to enforce it. And then our great secretary forwarded me the ordinance and I almost threw up again. I mean, it is so overwhelming. I think it goes against Reed versus Town of Gilbert. I think it goes in simple words of Thomas and his order. I mean, as long as the sign ordinances are even handed, there shouldn't be a problem. I don't even know how many pages is that. I stopped counting after 25. I mean, this isn't even handed. We don't have a sign ordinance right now that we're enforcing for the last, what, 4 years? What problems have occurred? Any?
You know, nothing that would be any different than when, if we put this new.
That's what I'm
I don't
saying,
think
but
so.
we haven't had one in 4 years and we haven't had any issues. So why would we burden our residents with something that I don't, and it would be a book if you put it together, like Gone with the Wind. I mean, people's heads would be spinning. Last work session, we were concerned about too many permits coming in, reducing that one, the 5-year look back to 1 year. My God, somebody put a sign in their yard of whatever, it has to be this big. No, that you're selling this type of object, it only can be this big. This is just ridiculous. This is government overreaching, and I can't support it. I'm sorry, Kyle. I told you I was gonna do it. I can't impose this on our residents.
Councilmember Elliott.
Well, I share the same concerns in terms of the administration of the ordinance. And I'm comforted by you saying that you feel like you could administer it. So that's good. But the other side of it is, can our citizens understand it? And one way of avoiding litigation is to have clear rules. And so you never get to litigation and have to defend anything if everything works smoothly and you end up with no problem. One thing I was wondering about, and I understand, I mean, I certainly appreciate all the work that has gone into this, and I understand the goal. I'm wondering though, obviously, I think you mentioned that municipalities throughout the state have been dealing with this very same issue and redrafting their ordinances. Can we see some samples perhaps of other ones that have a little bit more direct and simplified language? It's not the language that's simplified, the terms.
I can certainly research how other communities have done this in other parts of the state. I can tell you when Reed first came down, there were 2 firms in the state of Florida that were willing to rewrite them for cities. It sort of became a cottage, service. One of the attorneys at one of those firms who was doing that passed away or became very ill around 2017, 18. Their firm stopped doing it altogether. And so our firm said, well, at least they've done a few. We'll look at what they've done and we'll use that, adapt it towards our clients. And that's what you have in front of you, which reflects what communities were doing at that time in response to Reed. And I'm not suggesting this is the only way to write a sign code. There are other approaches, we can find them. If that's the will of the commission or the council, I'm happy to look into that. We can do more in that regard. Thus far, it's mostly been we'll look at it, we'll get back to you. And so I'm not clear that that's what's desired. I know there are members of the council who have been vocal in that regard, and I respect that opinion. I just want to make sure I work for a consensus direction. And so I can definitely provide more backing in that way. I think we also have Mr. Cerna here. I don't know if he has additional context he may be able to provide in that regard, as well as he and I don't always work in the same communities or in the same regions. So.
Mr. Roberts.
So the changes that we currently see that are highlighted and striked out in red text, that type of change. We were the ones who, or some of us that are here, the ones who worked on making changes, correct? Over time.
Within the framework of the existing template, those were the things where I said, listen, this is where it really is. I want you to understand this number was here's a number. If you guys want to change it, change it. And that was the discussion when a prior composition of the council, though 3 of you at least were there, did discuss this and give some direction. That's how we got to the draft.
Okay.
But again, highlighting that 60 days, for example, is not some Supreme Court requirement.
Right.
And so I didn't want to mislead you in that regard when I say this is drafted for legal compliance. And then you say, well, where does it say it has to be 12 feet and not 20 feet, Randy? It doesn't. And I want to make sure that those customizable elements are quite literally highlighted for your review as the policy maker.
Okay.
Brady, I want to put a sign in my yard. It says, Jesus saves me. Okay, on a big 4x8 piece of plywood. Is that free speech protected?
it's protected by the First Amendment, but you can still have time, place, and manner restrictions. And so if we say, okay, you can have that sign, but it can only be, 5 by 7, you have the ability to regulate in that fashion. And so we would say, hey, yeah, you can put your Jesus is love or Jesus saves or, let's go Brandon, F Trump, all the things that we've seen that have caused great consternation in a lot of communities, as long as they're consistent with those sorts of things.
But
It is First Amendment speech, yes, sir.
And this is no reflection on you, what you submitted to. Okay, so don't take this so personal.
I'm not.
Yeah, but you're regulating the size of a company or whatever, okay, and that's what I think.
It's the commercial versus non-commercial dichotomy that I think.
And I
you're
think
pointing to,
that's
and that actually is a very well recognized principle, both in Reed and in its progeny. In the cases since, the Supreme Court has consistently held that the commercial versus non-commercial dichotomy is appropriate for differing regulation. And that, to the extent that there's a dichotomy, that's what you're seeing.
But my question posed, I would think, because of the variables of different sizes of signs in this thing, I think I would go right to the Supreme Court. Even though when I said Jesus, I meant the guy working down the end of the street. His name's Jesus. But what I'm saying, this is the way you can really get yourself jammed up in a community. I mean, I think we should just let this alone.
What I would say, just as a word of caution in that context, is the existing code in its current form has language in it that we cannot enforce. And in as much as it includes, I believe, and I'm trying to remember because it's been a moment. If it has, for example, the political signs and provisions, which I believe it does, they can only be out,
Separates.
this size, this number, this whatever. You can't enforce that. And what happens is then you get more to the point on your concern about citizens. A citizen reads this and says, hey, the vote for Randy signs are all over the place. They're too big. Do something about it. Oh, we can't do anything about it. Then why'd you keep it on the book? Like, why have a code if you can't enforce it? That's ridiculous. You knew that, and you knew, and then we run into that line. And so we have to do something about it. And maybe this isn't that thing.
But isn't our code right now for signs, isn't that held in abeyance? We're not enforcing it?
We're not presently enforcing it because of that
Yeah.
reason. However, I don't think it prudent, as your legal advisor, my advice would not be hold it in abatement in perpetuity. It would be, we recognize that it's an imperfect product at the moment, and let's find a better product. And again, this may not be it, but we need something that I think better harmonizes it. And if the collective or even divided consensus, given our current numbers, is that, I want to see more, I want more information, or I want other options, or I want to see what can be done, then let's do that. That's fine. My advice to you would not be to say, play it as it lies and just keep your sign code in abatement, because it also creates false or unreasonable expectations on your city staff of the residents at large.
And we have seen abuse cases in the past. It's completely, it steers the council in the wrong direction to say that we've never had a problem. We've not had a problem lately, but we have seen it. And occasionally we do, a guy, unlicensed, whatever, nails a sign to a post and walks away. They come along and they stick their sign in the corner of somebody's empty lot and they walk away. Even during the elections, we saw that it was just completely off the hook. I believe that we do have to regulate signs. Otherwise, we're leaving ourselves wide open for problems in the future. It may not be a problem right now. We're quiet and we're calm, and I appreciate that, but it may not always be that way, especially with these home-based businesses, if they start cropping up.
And I would tell you that to the extent other jurisdictions have done this, where I've seen the council have the most angst, has usually been because when we talk about non-commercial temporary signage, which is the sort of nomenclature for anything from like Home and for the Cure or Vote for Randy signs, the most challenge has often been the politicians looking at this saying, okay, we're going to limit people to 5 temporary signs. And there's an election where we have 3 seats up, the president, and vote yes on, 7 and all this stuff. that applies just as much as it's Randy's birthday and we put signs out, you know, in the yard and stuff. And so that's often where I've seen councils struggle extensively. The other part is on how many prohibited signs do you want to enumerate or identify? And in the ways of like snipe signs, like I put I happen to find out that the lot next to Frank's is empty and I put a little sign up that says take karate classes at my dojo. You know, nobody's really monitoring that, but I'm putting them in all the places that all throughout town, because there's several places you could find it anywhere. We're like, oh, but nobody's really monitoring. So those sorts of things are where the rubber's met the road in some communities, or where there's been the most discussion. Ultimately, I work at your pleasure. My recommendation at this stage would be, if you want to see other products, I'm committed to getting you not just this template, but here are how you will see some uniformity. I'm not going to say you'll find things identical, similar, though not the same. And I'm happy to provide those and then see if there's, you know, other communities that might be better suited for you, and other communities that are not just communities my firm has drafted. Obviously, you'll get a more consistent product. My inquiry at this point would be, at the risk of upsetting a peer and colleague, is if Mr. Serna had anything he wished to add at this from a planner's perspective, or what he's seen advising other communities.
Mr. Serna.
Yeah, we did not comment on the framework of that, because we're gonna defer to the attorneys as far as it meeting the legal requirements. We noted there are new sections, but we understand that those sections are probably required to meet legal requirements, and then the content issues. We just sort of focused on the types of signs. I think the attorney mentioned prohibited signs. That's all new. Some, you know, that's something that's a section you might want to pay attention to. And then we also looked at the numbers as far as how many and how large, just to look at the differences. That's really what we wanted to, we thought maybe you should focus on, if, you know, if currently you're allowed a certain number and a certain size of signs, what would the impacts be of this proposed regulation? As far as the way it's laid out and the length, we did not provide comments on. There are other examples that I'm sure the attorney could provide and we could provide. This community's a little different because it doesn't have a large commercial section, and that's usually where most of the sign regulations are focused on. So definitely could find some shorter examples, but we didn't want to comment on how it's laid out or anything, because of the, you know, we do want to make sure it meets the legal requirements.
Mr. Roberts, you've not chimed in on this.
I think what Kim requested will help if we can get some finished products that some cities in our area are currently using. And if Kyle's comfortable with those, I think we can probably take a look at those, however many we get, and use parts from each one to come up with something that we think fits best. Keeping in mind that we are pretty much entirely a residential community. So a lot of the sign information that may be on some of those other towns and cities are going to include commercial, which we really don't have. So we can hopefully simplify some of those that have been in existence and are working well. You know, that's the biggest form of flattery. If we can find a sign ordinance that's been in place for not a very long time period, because it may be outdated with respect to some of the new changes that the state or federal government's put in place. So, but I think those would be a good tool to take a look at and develop our own. What we have here right now may be very close to what we're looking for. I mean, Kyle has said more than a couple of times that he's comfortable with it, and he thinks it can be taken a look at by the officers that are keeping those in line. So if Kyle's comfortable with it and he's comfortable that we can enforce the sign ordinance, that's important.
I think,
And whenever I scoured through this, I mean, about half of it is definitions. And I mean, we have definitions in every chapter. It's the very first thing that happens. And unfortunately, whenever you're referring to signs, there are so many items that must be defined before you can even say, now that you know what this is, here's the rules for it. I think that it would be nice if there was a clear separation between residential and business. The problem is that a lot of it is replicated if you do that. And so you would actually make it grow if you were to split it into two completely different sections. Councilmember Elliott, I would be interested in you looking through this after it's reviewed. After it goes through the initial review, and let's see what the recommendations come back. And once we've got recommendations made, then maybe we take a second look and maybe you take a deep dive into it because you have a legal background.
When you mean, when it comes back for review, you're talking about some samples or what do you?
Yes.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
And member Shaw Elliott and I actually began this dialogue when she was a member of the Planning and Zoning Board, and she and I have exchanged some of the resources and materials that I was relying on and referencing in my exposition. And so I'm happy to work with you more directly on this as we started on the past. We've taken some detours through Form 6s and other things, but happy to revisit this and continue to work through it to get a product this community can be happy with.
And I think really, if we're going to try to take things away, what I would like to see is what we absolutely have to have. What we can keep just to make things more clearly defined, and then what we think is just not applicable for the city of Bel Air Beach.
And what I would ask of each of you as council members, and I mean this in a one-on-one context, is if you have, whether anecdotally or just having reviewed the like, hey, I remember, John's fishing spot back in '99 used to have a giant thing out here, and if whatever the thing is, if there's something about your community, I don't live here. And in a real sense, I don't live here. I don't see it day to day. So whether you're aware of a specific example or just a concern you have of something, hey, when I was traveling and I was in New Smyrna Beach, I saw this sort of thing, and I definitely don't want that sort of thing here. Whatever the concern, no disrespect to New Smyrna Beach. If you have particularized concerns, one is my client, but two is the policymakers who live here, just let me know so I can factor that in. By way of example, when I was working on a similar draft, which they've not yet adopted in Indian Rocks Beach, one of the concerns became, hey, well, we have this property that's right off the bridge that's always had this. Will that be considered non-conforming? Do we need to give it any kind of special dispensation? Those sorts of things. Like, I don't know what, is considered the character and history. And so I always welcome that input. And I just want to make clear to all four of you and anybody who should join your ranks, when I'm making policy, I'm doing it for you. Give me the input and I'm happy to evaluate it.
Yeah, and you probably already know this, but what actually kicked all of this off to begin with was that we had one gentleman who was hanging a 20-foot banner on the back of his balcony, and that was infuriating people. And then you had another guy who had a small political sign, and his neighbor didn't like the candidate. And so multiple phone calls were coming in. This is before City Manager Riefler took over, but we just didn't have a clear cut direction on what to do in these cases.
And by virtue of what I do and the associations I'm in, I'm familiar with some of the more notable examples around the state of that. And I plan to reach out to their city attorneys and see, in light of what, those experiences were post-Reed, Reed being the Supreme Court case, how have you adapted? What have you done anything with your code, and see if we can't get the benefit of the controversy without having to go through it.
Okay.
Are you saying IRB is looking to redo their sign ordinance?
Yes, they are or were as a result of Reed. They have not yet adopted it. They have a similar draft before them. And they got sidetracked into an issue that of short-term rentals that they felt that this was not an undertaking. So it's also, they're in a similar posture to you where it's come before their planning and zoning board a couple times and their commission once or twice under previous compositions, but they've not adopted it. They're not actively, it's not actively on an agenda. It's on the action item list of policies if we can get past one other policy.
Because they have a lot more,
But their community is different in character from yours.
yeah,
Largely.
extremely, and
Yes, sir.
their current sign ordinance is like 28 pages compared to this 45, I guess, or something like that.
Understood,
Yeah.
understood.
But they're also going through a refresh. of those.
They're evaluating all their policies as any community should do regularly.
Okay,
And this is Indian Rocks Beach we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, and they're pretty much going through that, they almost have, well, they have a very similar version of this, is that right?
Correct.
Okay,
Half the version.
is that half now or half?
Well, half of right now.
Oh, yeah, okay, so, but what they have is something larger that's
What's
more,
been proposed to them is substantially similar to what's been proposed to you.
okay, all right,
With distinctions made for each of your communities and Kyle can attest that in giving it to him, I said, you know, if there are things that are specific to your community, let us know, you administer it, we'll add it as appropriate. We try to tailor it, but again, when you're not on the ground in the trenches as it is at each day in a community, you have to respect your client's input, and that's what we're trying to do.
everyone concerned, do you think that we can come back to this in next month's work session and bang through this?
I'd conservatively like to say, we can try for May. It might be June, just based on the efforts of getting. I know reaching out to other attorneys, I usually don't get the feedback as promptly as I'd like it. And I do want to talk to some of my peers and colleagues to make sure I'm getting you the benefit of that knowledge. So I would say perhaps better to commit to June. And if we're ready in May, then that's great.
Okay. Council, everyone good with that?
yes. Just a quick comment I wanted to make. In my opinion, it's not always, less is not always better in something like this. Because I think Kyle, when he gets a phone call and somebody's asking him about a specific type of sign they want to use and what size it is and where they want to put it, it's always nice if he could look at the sign ordinance and say, yes, on page 14, this is exactly how it needs to be handled. As opposed to, we don't really address that. That's a problem.
And that's the balance we're running. It's the same is true in your personal life when you talk about insurance. How much just in case resources do you wish to have? So at some point you're overinsured, but you're never quite sure when that moment is until, you realize it. So again, I at the risk of beating a dead horse, I'm prepared to get you more information and some comparison and contrast, work with member Shaw Elliott and see if we can't either come up with something different or explain why this is the best fit if it is.
And what happens if Kyle says this is where it's located and the guy has a little bit of sign knowledge and says, well, that's not what Reed Gilbert says.
Well, anybody can make a legal challenge.
Yeah,
Councilmember
that's
Baker.
exactly,
I don't,
Yeah.
I would not predicate policymaking based purely on the potential that somebody may make a legal challenge. Only because that possibility always exists. Anytime you regulate, anytime you, that's a possibility.
All right,
Thank you.
is that it? Any other questions or comments on this? All right. Thank you very much for being here tonight. And
You're welcome.
I look forward to your review and getting it back to the city attorney. And I appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
All right, now we are up to item number 2, discussion of stormwater study. And I believe we have Larry Flutie online.
Live.
Oh, well, you're here. He's live. I don't know why I see your name up there.
He's gonna
It's being logged in.
present through the.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
Zoom.
funny because I thought I saw him and then I saw his name. I thought he left, but I actually couldn't see him back there.
I'm right here, I'm on the left.
Thank you for being here tonight. How are you?
Great.
Good.
Okay, let's see. Technology, I'm sorry. And I believe I have to share my screen.
Yes.
let's go through the plans. There we go. Okay, well, we're working on the stormwater pumps and I have here tonight some options for the 9th Street location. We have some options to look at. And then for 7th, we also have a location. Starting off with the location on 9th, we have 4 different options. And what you see up now, option 1, locating that in an area where there's an existing inlet, which is the last inlet before it goes out to the seawall.
Excuse me,
And,
Mr. Flutie, is this C2 that was passed out? Are we looking at that on the screen?
Top
Yep.
page.
C2.
All right, thank you.
The what I'll point out is one of the things to remember in this area on 9th Street is all the other utilities that are located underground. And underneath there, we have existing gravity sanitary sewer. We have Pinellas County water main. We have the reclaimed water main. And we also have some overhead utilities, which we kind of tried to show everything there on the map, so we have an idea of what we're running into and what places we have to work around. So in this location, it's within the right of way. It's going to be trying to make these pump stations as less industrial looking as possible because of the residential area where they're located and functional. In this location, we're looking at, we first looked at cast in place wet wells with the pumps, and then we looked at wet wells for your sanitary lift stations. They're precast structure. So we've started precast is the way to go for it as far as cost and keeping the cost down. And so this is a precast wet well, similar to what you see at a lift station. And there we would intercept the stormwater, and the type of pumps that we would use. We talked to MWI pumps, who manufacture storm pump systems. And so we worked with them, gave them the flow rates and the elevations to work with. And so they came up with a pump size and the cost. So we put together the equipment costs and then the construction costs for that. And then this option 1, and getting the water out, because the water pulls up there and it doesn't have a way to get out. That's why it's ponding up when we're doing the project. Is we would intercept that at the last manhole or storm sewer before it goes out, and discharge that to the creek that's just to the northeast. So run in front of the property line would be about an 8-inch discharge, and that will draw the water down. That would be ponding on the street side. So that's option.
Mr. Flutie, can you explain to me what it is? I see plumbing. I see a square, I see a big black circle, I see little white circles. Can you define those before we get any further so we know what we're looking at?
I'm glad you asked that, because yes, it is not familiar enough. Can you see that as I'm pointing at that arrow on the?
I can, yes.
Okay. What we have here is this location here. You see this circle with the white in the middle?
Yep.
Okay, that's the proposed wet well or the pump station location. And what we're doing is these lines, these triple lines that you see here, that's the stormwater system that's carrying the water through the inlets to the manholes, and then it discharges through here and goes out to the seawall. So that's where all the water collected is being. So what you see here is these items here that you see here, these squares with the little D's in there. Those are stormwater inlets.
Okay,
And this darker dashed line that you see kind of in the street here, that's the underground gravity sanitary sewer. So we had to get an idea of where that is and where it's going. And it's kind of collecting there to 3 points there. And so it kind of collects there. What we have shown here is kind of hard to see, but this large dark line that you see
yes,
and goes around on the curbside. Well, that's your potable water. That's Pinellas County water supply system. And and forgive me, but there's another lighter dash line you can kind of put on the south side of the street as it comes along
under the driveways.
under the driveways. That is the reclaimed water. That's a 4-inch reclaimed water. And that comes down, and it actually comes down to in front of the houses, and it will go south to the next street, and then it goes north in front of the houses and in that right of way, and it goes up and feeds the reclaim system up this way, City Hall. And then overhead, you can't see it very well, but it's telephone poles. It's like there's right there where I have the dot there. That's a telephone pole, and then there's one across the street right in front of this house. That's a telephone pole, and so the power lines are strapped between those.
How deep's that 4-inch water reclaim line?
I don't have a depth on it, but typically it's about 40 inches, 30. And that's just the county standard now. Before we have to get some, I would get some survey to make sure what the actual depth is. It could be 30 inches.
I thought it was above 30.
Yeah. It could be.
There's no frost line here. So.
Right. All right.
Thank you
So-
very much. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, no, please. And I think here on that, so with that, the location of the pump station, and then what we have is dark line. That's the discharge that would take it to the north to the creek and discharge it out there. And so the goal here on this one and on these options are to, when the tide is up high, water is not getting out and it's ponding up, this pump system will take it out to this ditch, and it'll be at a higher level, so it'll be able to discharge and suck that water out. And that's the goal there on this. on
Okay,
this
and
option.
you said the big round black circle, that is basically the well.
Yes.
Okay, so in item, option 3, can you
Yeah.
tell me where that well is?
It's up,
Okay.
it's up at that. It's up here, David.
Oh, way up high. Okay, I see it now.
If you look at the north
Yeah.
where it's going to the creek, look at where the creek is.
Okay,
You're
I
gonna
see
see
it
the
now.
black line and then a dark mass. Sorry for the printout. But that's the riprap where it would discharge it out into. But the location there, if you can see the white D,
Yeah, it's
That-
kind of in the shadow. That's why I
Yeah.
didn't see it.
He's at three, option three.
It's more towards the sandbag, Steve.
Okay.
Now, is the elevation higher in option 3?
yes,
That's what I figured. What's the lowest elevation out of all? Where the well would be?
the lowest. Probably. They're all very close, but option one would be the lowest.
What size would the well be?
The well would be a 6 foot diameter.
Okay, so you're not making a sump station, you're not making a sump basin or a retention basin at all, you just make, okay.
Yeah, it would be right in the wet well.
And option 1 would require an easement, is that correct?
It's in the right of way.
It's in the right of way now?
Yeah, when we looked at all these, we tried to keep everything in right of way or in publicly owned lands.
Okay. Because we already have plumbing there now.
Right.
So option one's the cheapest way of doing it since it's,
Yeah, I mean, they're all very close, but yeah.
So do you have a representation of what that well would look like?
Yes, I do. You see that? Yeah, that's the, it's a circular well, 6 foot diameter. The depth would vary based upon the depth of the existing gravity.
Existing pipe,
Yeah,
all right, and what about height up out of the ground? What are we looking at?
it's going to be ground level top.
So it'll be pretty flat.
Right, and then what would be extending above the ground would be the control box that you see that there, and so those are usually about 4 to 5 feet,
Okay,
stainless steel box. But the top would be at ground level. And
so 4 to
yes,
5 feet.
example, the 22nd Street sanitary lift station. Did you
Yes.
see? It'll look a lot like that.
A lot like that, okay.
could you repeat what, 22nd Street?
Lift station.
Just
Oh, okay.
sanitary, yeah.
So you're saying that you mentioned there's a creek there. So the pump is gonna pump to that open creek. And then gravity just takes that out.
From the creek, yes.
Okay, so there's no outfall pipe or anything there, it's just through gravity empties into there. So if we have a very, very high tide, what happens there? Does that water actually back up on that creek?
No, I'm trying to work my,
He's gonna have it
that to that.
pretty high so that the water would have to come up all the way to the top of that swale to be blocking the pipe.
Right, for the pipe's sake, but right now, I was just curious, if we get a real high tide, does it back up and,
Oh, currently in that swale, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And it backs up into that retention pond.
in the retention pond? Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah.
Has
check
that
it.
ever overflown? Has that ever overflowed? Flown?
I have not seen it.
That's good.
During a dahlia, it was close.
So what would be the max high tide is 3.4 feet? So but one above that. What I'm saying is, what would that creek's height be? Would that be 4 feet? Would that be 5 feet? Would it be 3.7 feet?
What do you have for the elevation right where the swale
I
is?
think our max high tide is 3.4 right.
The, okay, let me pull that up. At the swell.
And that wouldn't be with a storm, you get a storm surge. and the wind's blowing this direction.
It's about
And-
elevation 4 at the swell top of bank.
No,
What
storm
is it?
surge is 5.4.
What is it on that road, Crown?
Huh?
What is
So
it
about
on
to
the
get a
road?
storm, a hurricane.
Oh, on the road?
Well, that was 130 miles.
It Depends on which way the wind's going and spinning, all that. If it comes this way, yeah.
The road. There at the creek, it's 3.94, almost elevation 4.
And that creek is is there a pipe at the end of the creek? How does it exit the seawall?
There's a pipe coming from the retention pond underneath the road
Okay,
out the swale.
Right.
all right.
The
And-
creek itself doesn't have a wall or anything, right? It's just a natural creek.
It's just a
Yeah.
ditch
Yeah.
The ditch, yeah.
and it does fill up quite often.
Yeah.
So I guess what we need to realize is that, first off, you think that all of these options are pretty much equal, maybe within an inch or two?
Correct.
Okay, all right. And as far as the exit strategy, is there any advantage or disadvantage to picking one particular location for the pumping station?
Now, you get the most advantage by picking at the lowest downstream point that you can.
Right.
But with the elevations that we're talking about, it isn't really gonna make that big of a difference between if you pick it there where we showed option 1 or across the street.
Right.
With other options, they're going to be functioning about pretty close to the same.
So it really boils down to aesthetics and cost.
Yes.
Okay. And as far as the cost goes, it doesn't really look like there's a whole lot of difference.
No.
Okay, all right, so more than likely, the neighbors that are affected would probably want to know what, okay, here's the options, pick one. What do you think? You know, would you want this across the street from your house? Would you want it next to your house?
Mhm.
You're the one that's got to look at it, but here's the benefits.
Are you talking about, I mean, the well's buried. So the only thing we're talking about for aesthetics is the control box, right?
Yeah, drive down 22nd Street and it's this big thing sticking up and it has lights on it.
Yeah. But I'm thinking more like at 7th Street where they have the sewer pump station. Did you
Not,
go down there? Have you know our sewer pump station, don't you?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say it would be probably half the size of that or.
Way less.
Well,
Yeah, that's.
way like, yeah, yeah. Way less than that.
Yeah.
Can panels be built around that?
Can what?
Panels be built around?
Like decorative panels, you're
Yeah.
talking about something
You
to hide it.
can, yes. The in the location here on 9th Street. If there's should be enough room to do that if
I appreciate all your time, Larry, and you weren't here when MWI was in. But they said they actually have some neighborhoods where you don't see anything. The control box and everything is buried. Did
can.
they talk to you about that at all?
I didn't talk about buried control box.
Because I was concerned about, well, what about maintenance at? They said, we have these 20 years, that we don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I can certainly talk to them about that, about on the control, mainly we're talking about the controls at the pumps. The pumps and the well itself is below grade. Then it's the control panel. What I've shown here is what's typically done. It can be in an underground vault as long as we keep the vault dry. Yes, we can do that. And
because the area you're talking about. Thursday of when we got that storm. That was still wet, that area, because I had a meeting over here at 9 o'clock in the morning. And that was still wet. There was still water accumulated the following day. You know, and you know it. You probably
I
had
wasn't
water-
home, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
but I took
Okay, yeah, we had
photos.
2 feet of water in the street again.
what does,
My neighbor took photos,
Yeah.
I should say.
Well, I don't think the people is what I'm saying would really be. blown out of proportion, having a control box there if it were gonna alleviate this,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
you talking about underground?
Well, I'm talking about anything.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, you could put shrubbery around it, you could put a wall, decorative wall. If you got rid of the flooding,
Cranes, you
well,
know.
yeah, just say- yeah, but what I'm saying is-
Concrete.
here's the alternative, you know, we'll get water in your house or we can have it.
Exactly.
And obviously, hiding the entire thing may be an option, but I'm sure that drives cost up. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we're talking the cost of the fence and the material. And one of the things to think about, even, you know, putting the control panel in a vault under the ground would be making sure that it's watertight, because it's gonna be in
Correct.
underwater for a while.
Seals break down,
Yeah.
things happen, depending upon how many events you have, there's increased maintenance. I'm gonna respond to Mr. Beam right quick. Please go ahead. You can just speak from right there.
Anybody that has a pump like that in front of a home. Be a real deterrent maintenance anytime, night or day or whatever. If it was gonna be put in and I had anything to say about it, I would move it into the city property on the park. And run the pipe over. But before even doing that. How do you plan on powering this thing up? And the power's out here, how's it gonna work?
Well, the power would be provided through the
Duke Energy?
Duke Energy. And it'd work the same way as the your sanitary lift stations, you know, they have a
Well,
backup power.
they have emergency generators they bring out and plug in.
Well, we're not,
When they're not working,
right.
because we've done that.
I haven't worked on the emergency on what to do when it's out, but the idea or the situation in this location would be having a generator run on site and
When the
to do
water does come up and go over, and it's
Yeah.
sitting out here. You can't run that pump, so you're gonna have to have various devices on there to shut it off when the water's too high.
yes, right.
Because it makes no sense to run.
We're aware of that, and I'm gonna get to that also.
Another point. One time was the seawall planned along here. So if that seawall was put in, it would help the situation. And then the swale could be made larger. Take more of the water that flows down behind Ninth Street. Behind the homes that are fed off. Come off Broadway Boulevard. That could block a lot of the water, give you extra capacity. How much capacity? I don't know. This was in discussion years ago. They were even gonna put dig up the parking lot. And put a. One to go on that, to collect some of the water. And drain it. But the fact that you're gonna lose power out here. Have you thought about this, Mr. Banker?
Well, exactly. I brought that up when MWI Pumps was there and they said diesel backup generators would have to come in, but going with your tenure of residency here, I've heard about that seawall too being installed back here. And I've only been here 10 years and there's been nothing that I've seen planned on proceeding there. And I agree 100% with you. That would reduce an enormous amount of.
So this is turning into a giant project, and right now I'd like for everyone just to focus on the pumping stations. Because I do see benefits to having them, but I also want everyone to understand that it's not going to prevent flooding. What it's going to do is it's going to reduce the amount of flood time. Because as soon as the water gets above the seawall, you're flooded. There's no stopping it. No pump's gonna fix it. It's only for that period between when the check valve is closed and the time that the water is below the top of the seawall. So you've got this little time right here where it's the difference of 4 or 5, 6 hours that you're underwater versus say 30 minutes. The damage is still done. You're just, it's less time.
And if you don't have power, then you're not gonna have to need it.
Well, the power is another story because we did discuss buying a generator and it was mixed.
I know.
Yeah.
We talked about that when you were at house, for some reason. That was taken out of budget.
Just for point of reference, okay? When it breaches the seawall from First Street down to 14th Street, people have 2 to 4 feet of water already in the street. When we had MWI pumps in there, I gave them a bunch of mathematical calculations of gallons of water a street width and everything like that. They ran them and they said, yes, when it breaches a seawall, you will get water into the street. But as Dave pointed out, that's only for a short period of time. There would be no water in the street prior to that. So you already, when the water comes over the seawall and you already have 4 feet of water in the street, where's it going? Into the house. You're going to get water in the street, but you're going to get it in the street, not in your driveways and in your house.
There's also another advantage to doing this, is that during high tide, the check valve closes and then we get a torrential downpour. That's really the one where we will receive the most benefit if we do this project. That's where it's problematic. We cannot stop hurricane tidal surge. You can't stop it. This isn't going to fix it. Your house is still going to receive damage. Yes, you'll be able to get into your home quicker or get in your car quicker and leave or get home quicker. But it's the July 4 to 8 inches in a single day where high tide happens to happen at the same time. That's where it's going to fix that problem.
Pointed out like last week or the week before, we had a hot 3.1 high tide. And your check valve or whatever, they close at 2.8 feet. So the tide was up to 3.1 feet. We had that storm that came in for an hour. It only dumped about 1.5 inches worth of rain. And there was 2 feet of water in the street. It stayed in that street for almost 2.5 hours because it came in right when the tide was right around 3 feet. Tide went up to 3.1. And I said to my wife, I said to my neighbor, when it hits 2.8, it'll start going out. And it stayed there until it hit 2.8 and it started draining out again. Yeah.
And my understanding is that with the gravity feed, the water is going from the top of the street from Gulf all the way down and it's pooling there.
Right.
And it can't get out. And so what happens then is when more water comes, there's a point where it's just gonna start coming back.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If I might take a step back, I'm not sure I understand or whether we've walked through all of the 4 options. And maybe we can comment on those.
Sure.
Because I can comment from an aesthetic standpoint, what I think about those, but I'd like to hear from an engineering standpoint. What are the attributes of each of these options?
Okay. I'll start with option 1. And this option allows us to collect the water at the very last inlet before it goes out. So it's at the lowest point. And so to get this out where it's ponding up or it's not able to get out, that's why we chose a discharge to the creek. That's the 8-inch discharge. So when the water is rising, there are check valves in there, so it won't come back through that creek back into the inlet. So it's just a one-way flow. And this allows us then to collect the water on 9th Street and then get that water and discharge it out to the creek. The next option.
And is that the heavy line that goes from the circle to the
Yes.
creek? Okay.
Did you just say that you're going to deposit it in the creek where there's a check valve? Did I
Is that what I just heard?
It's gonna go to the north, to the creek. There's no check valve there.
There's no check valve there. Okay. You know, it seems to me that the final exit should be over the seawall, not through it. Because you're still low. You've got the same problem. If if the water comes up too high, I mean,
Does it go back into that well?
yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the pressure it's strong enough to push it on
Well,
out.
the discharge line from that wet well to the creek to the north is a 8-inch force main. Think of it that way.
Mhm.
And so when water is flowing through that, it can only go one way because there are check valves
Check
in
valves,
the
yeah.
wet well.
Okay, all right.
In that line.
Yeah, but I think he's pointing out, what if it's not going, the pump's not on yet? The water would be flowing back. It's still.
Well, the check valve would supposedly stop it. Okay, all right. So you would effectively, if you had a high tide event, it wasn't over the seawall, you would have enough pressure that it would still be blowing it out through that pipe.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, I'm fine with that then.
And let me ask this while we're on this one. Is there any difference between what's proposed versus we're gonna be tearing up the street or resurfacing the street if it were projected out farther and into the street and not through all of those driveways?
You're talking about the
Line.
discharge line?
Yeah,
So take it out into the street?
is that an option? And
It can be. Yeah.
This seems like an easier.
It's just more
direct approach,
expensive
though.
that way.
Yeah, because now you're having to, you're having to contend with, there's already a line right there running down the street.
and what is that line?
The heavy dash line is sanitary sewer.
Okay,
To the county owns.
And then there's a solid line on the west side of the street. That's water main. And then there's a dash line that's running along in front of the homes on the east side. Right-hand side. That's the reclaim wall.
if you could give us a key, that would be helpful. Or
Huh?
if you could give us a key or a legend. well,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
That would be helpful.
And if you did it middle of the street, right now, you're only proposing taking 1 inch. You're milling 1 inch off right now, and if you put this in the street, you're gonna have to go down at least a couple feet. Gonna have to put in at least 6 inches of modified in there, plus the blacktop 3 inches, so that's gonna be.
It's much more expensive
Yeah,
because
yes,
you gotta
very.
get densities in the street for the traffic and all that.
So would be doing that anyway with building it through the.
Not
Driveway.
through, you don't have to worry about asphalt. You don't have to worry
I see what
about,
you're saying,
You're
okay.
not tearing the whole street up.
Take the pavers down. They got like
You're just
pavers there, it
building
looks
it down.
like.
Mr. Flutie, how are you on time?
I'm fine.
Are you fine?
Yeah.
Council, I'd like to call a necessary 5-minute break. All right. Everyone do me a favor, don't discuss this while we're at break, all right? All right. We're back to work again. Thank you, Mr. Flutie. It's greatly appreciated. Sure.
So we discussing option 2?
There we go. Okay. I guess we're going through the options and I think the question we had was kind of explain each of the options a little bit
Yeah.
and run through them. So, the option 1, it's at the last manhole, putting the wet well for the proposed stormwater pump. And there being at the downstream end, it'd be able to drain the water, pump it out to the creek to the north. And there won't be any backflow through that because it's a force main so that won't have an effect of backflowing through the wet well back up into the street. And option 2 is taking that same concept and taking it across the street. And there, the discharge again would be from that wet well to the creek and try to avoid as much conflicts with the water and the reclaimed water and it being a force main, it doesn't have to be dictated by gravity flow. So that would be a line that would be it's the same depth as the water lines. So the kind of thing is, since it's going to be a force main. And
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? What doesn't have to be fed by gravity?
the difference between the lines that we have on this drawing, you'll see the inlets that collected in the lines, and it takes it all the way to the wet well of the pump station. That's all gravity line, so it's all fed by water flowing through the culvert. And what we would do at that location is put in a pump station or the pumps that would take that water and then it controlled, it would then take that water and pump it out to the creek to the north. And this wet well also be fed and have access, because since it's all low, this would be able to drain the water from the inlets across the street as well.
Same concept, across the street and the pipe has to cross the
Exactly,
street.
that's it.
Okay.
Is that the lowest point?
No, the
On the street?
option 1 is the lowest point, but we're only within a few inches of difference in the.
And at that point, that no matter where it is, the well is going to be lower than the lowest point. The entire.
Exactly.
Oh, well, okay,
in
thank
the-
you.
In the entire area,
And that is a cheaper option than 1, it looks like.
which I'm really surprised. It's.
Yeah.
What?
Why is that?
Yeah, cranking out the numbers, that's how it came out.
It's probably because it's right there on the street corner and not hidden well.
And it is going through the street.
Yeah, it's not hitting well at all. Okay, option 3 is thought about, the location of the wet well and the pump. Is what if we took it to the north and put it up against the creek and have a gravity line connected to the downstream storm manhole, so that water can be siphoned out of that through the culvert here and then pumped over into the creek. And what we would do here is that this storm line from that existing manhole to the wet well would be about a 24-inch reinforced concrete pipe. So it'd be a concrete pipe drainage line. And then that will go into the wet well, and then that'll be pumped up and over into the creek. And as the tide and the elevation goes up, it worked just like the others. The backflow would not be back up into that pipe, but it would stay within that system.
As far as strain on the pump, do you believe that there would be any difference?
Not in these loads. There's not enough.
Not enough elevation change?
Right.
Okay.
No, and that's anywhere, the wet well can go in practically any location that we can find a location for it. The costs are going to be within the same range that we have here. It's just how do we get water to it? So that's why you kind of see it kind of over top the existing stormwater lines and then pumping it out. And the creek to the north is the easiest or less expensive way of getting the discharge away from the street and out.
What's the solid line between this and this? This is 3, so this is the one in the park.
Yeah.
Where's the line?
This is just gravity lines here. So this is where the pump is,
Okay, so here it was a solid line.
right?
So-
Because the pump was over here and pushing it this way. So the pump's right
Option
in those bushes.
3 seems to be the least invasive out of everything as far as aesthetics go.
Which one?
Option 3.
Yeah, it's on public ground. Now, what's 4? How does that differ?
Option 4 is on the other side of the street. Try to put it on the west side of the street. It's similar to option 2, except it's just in a different location.
Is that, whose property is that? Is that Stan Sofer's property?
It's rented. I know it's a
It's
rental.
a rental.
Yeah.
I can't remember what street he's on.
He's on, it's like 6.
Okay.
There's 6.
I've been told that house floods frequently.
Yeah. That's probably the lowest property.
I think it is, and that's why I asked if that was the lowest point, because it flooded during Irma. Yeah, it did, because
Yeah, I remember.
it maybe it was Idalia. It flooded in Idalia.
And then the one after.
I remember we were pretty
Yeah.
lucky.
It looks to me like any of these are a good solution. What I do notice though is that you've got centralized collection points. And I just wonder if there's any chance for failure by getting farther away from the centralized area. Was that what you were thinking whenever you said best options? Okay.
You talking a longer gravity run failure?
Yes, just in general, something possibly plugging all of it up because it's a central, one single point of failure.
So we were talking about the costing between option 1 and option 2. When I'm looking at the cost breakdown for option 2, I just didn't see anything there that jumped out at me that was going to take into account the cutting through the street, asphalt or anything like that. For the option
Oh,
2.
yeah.
breakdown.
No, I did. I didn't have a line item in there for asphalt replacement or things like that, but I did take that into account on the cost.
Okay, so you feel comfortable that cost, whatever it might be, is included in there? 'Cause
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe that's why it was showing that it was less expensive
Right.
than option 1, because you didn't allocate for any of that.
You're already gonna pave it.
Yeah.
You already had budgeted for that, so all you're doing is trenching that pipe in there and then modifying
Right.
That's what I
Modified
was
stone
asking
there,
about,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's not in a line item, where is it? Where is the cost?
It's in the original bid for the paving.
No, the cost breakout in that,
Oh,
right there.
Oh,
That's what I'm
good.
saying, yeah. And on the, option 4, we're showing the triple lines going from the, collection area there on option 4.
Okay, yeah,
Is that because that's not what's the size of that line?
that's an 8-inch line.
It is, but it.
Yeah. Yeah, from the wet well out, that'd be an 8-inch line.
Okay,
That'd be a force main.
but again, yeah, in option 2, it shows a thicker solid going from the pump. So that's my question. Why does it show differently? If we had the
Then-
key there, that would be representing something different.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
This is a thick, solid line.
Right,
Well, I can give you the real reason.
okay,
My drafting ability on CAD, I'm drawing a lot.
all right, no problem. So it should be solid
Yeah.
line there, going from the pump to the
that
key.
young lady, is she better at drawing or?
Oh, she's better than I. But we were
No problem,
coming up, so that's kind of my,
not a problem.
Now, does this change it, no matter what option, if we select an option and say, all right, we want to move forward with this, what does this do to the overall project? Does the rest of the project budget not change? Do we remain the same?
yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so
Let me make sure I understand that. So if you'll say that again, please.
So we're already budgeted for repairing all the plumbing, fixing the streets, fixing the gutters, finishing the citywide stormwater drain project. This is above and beyond that.
Yes.
Okay, but this is what we were all hoping for, was that you don't have to change the project because those are necessary anyway. So you pick up a convenient location and you drop in your well and your pump and your control mechanisms and power. I think that's one thing that's not on here. I don't see anything about power. So do we have any budget, any recommendations on that yet?
On the power, I'd rather talk with the Duke Energy
Okay,
first on that to get, I can tell you what we were figuring, like 50,000 for the power. But I don't know if that's a real number. I would
Well-
want to get a real number.
50,000 on top of this is much less than your initial proposal, where you were just, we'll say guesstimating, because you hadn't really dug into it.
Right.
Run a power cord from Kim's house.
Yeah, right.
I don't have a problem doing this project at all. I will vote for it.
Can I ask you a simple question? We have a stormwater tax. Right, that we pay, or residents pay. How much do we pull in every year for that?
Oh, 170,000 to 175.
And what is that percentage? I should know all this, but I'm talking about the percentage of the tax that the residents pay. Cause if we're pulling in 170,000 a year, of course, we want to use some of that money to pay back the bond, of course. But I want to see, like, from First Street to have these problems, and we could maybe just increase that a bit to 250 a year, you know what I'm saying?
It's 30 a month, so it's
Yeah, so you increase it another $5 or.
360 a year then.
It's 30 every 2 months.
Oh, it is, okay.
Every 2 months. So, you know what I'm saying? Another $5 or $10.
I think, the city manager had another idea of how to fund it. What would you explain? How to fund this? What your plan was? Was it just a budget amendment?
Oh, I mean, as far as like reserves, we have reserves. We just have to rework,
Well, if this works, is what I'm saying. I'd like to see the whole city eventually, because you got big problems down at First Street, eventually, you know what I'm saying? I don't, as MWI said, let's see if this works. We're digging up the street now. This works in the future. You know what I'm saying?
The other streets those projects are completed in that area.
Yes,
But while we're doing this one, this is a good place to
prototype.
as I was stating earlier, I really don't have a problem voting for this, whichever option. I'm actually going to ask you to speak to your neighbors and find out which option works best for the neighborhood. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to look at it and hear it and the construction and everything else. But also, they're the ones that you're gonna have to hear from whenever the water crests the seawall.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're gonna think that this is gonna stop flooding. And they need to all be aware that it's not going to stop flooding. It's going to help remove the flooding after it's happened.
Well, as well as prevent certain
it will
flooding
prevent, yes.
in
It'll
in
reduce.
these rain
The rainstorms,
situations when
correct.
when the tide is at its highest, and they're happening with more frequency and more severity.
Yes, yes.
So this will likely prevent quite a few of them. We get a big storm, everybody's in trouble,
Yep.
but this will likely prevent many storms.
Even a big storm, it may reduce the risk because as the one resident got up and says, there is a small window where it peaks.
Yep.
Okay, so if you can eliminate the water in the street before the peak, okay, then you've accomplished, I believe, a great task, as MWI explained when they were in here. Then you don't have that water sitting in the street for 6 to 8 hours like with the Dahlia.
And let me ask this, because the repairs that are underway, that is the normal project of repaving, and then when we find broken pipes, deal with the pipes, do some lining. Will that help 9th Street? I mean,
It will help get water to the inlets, to the collection points. So it'll get it there more efficiently than it is now. And the pipes aren't scheduled to be replaced, but I think what it will help is help get water to the collection points, which is at the inlets. And that's the big help, is getting it there. And then the pump system then will get it out in high water times, so that help the recovery would be better, because when water gets up so high, there's only so much water you can keep pumping out, but it will keep that intensity down, so it'll recover a lot faster.
because one thing I'd like for us to consider is that bringing the street project back to 9th Street too, while we consider all this, get bids, implement it, assuming that we're going to move ahead, is that it might still give some protection to 9th Street now as we're entering that big storm season. And also say that we're already like 7 months behind where the plan provided for 9th Street. We moved it over while we were considering this, but if we move ahead, I'd like for us to move it back to 9th Street, so at least we can get those protections in place.
And what would, the only way that would be possible would be if you select an option that does not cross the street. Am I correct? So if you pick an option where the tunnel goes through someone's yard, the exit tunnel, then you could theoretically move forward with 9th and go ahead and have the pavement and guttering and whatever else is in the plan. But if you select an option where it crosses the street, it's a big waste of money and time. Not, to do it and then come back, because how, Mr. Flutie, how long do you think it will take to gear up and to obtain the equipment? And then get Duke in line and do everything to install these pumps?
So essentially, how long will it take to install wet well pumps? I think a time frame on that, on digging that and putting that in, I want to say 6 to 8 months.
That's kind of what I figured. And that's lead time on the actual pumps and all the hardware.
Right.
NFW, I said.
I'm not confident on Duke.
What's that?
Duke's not very quick either. And
Right.
they gotta run three-phase power. And they got their engineering department, they want plans drawn up.
And they're gonna
Our
have to
engineering,
approve
they
it.
gotta, takes a
So
while.
I hope that answers your question. You have to decide which way. And I don't think does it add a lot more? Does it add any more to the cost if you come back later?
No.
Okay. It's provided you're not digging through the street, tunneling under the street.
Correct.
Okay.
From an engineering perspective, which is the preferred option?
The preferred option would be,
Option
from
one.
an engineering standpoint, option one.
And that's the one that wouldn't cross a street.
Correct.
Yeah, it keeps everything on that side of the street.
Yeah.
Don't have to be digging up a street. And then it gets it out.
There's one more item to consider also is how Duke is going to run their power.
Right.
That may require digging up the street.
That might. That's gonna be all up Duke.
And can we tell where their power is on this?
There's a power pole. See if I
There's a
can-
power pole right at,
One right
yeah,
there.
right there.
I don't know.
But is it
That's good.
high enough capacity to add that?
Yeah, I don't know what the
The
trans,
closest place I know has 3 phases are
that might only
our
be,
equipment room over here. So if they had to come all the way from our building.
Power pole's there at the edge where I got that arrow. And when I talked to the city manager, talk with Duke. Make sure, because we'll need 3-phase power there, so.
My recommendation would be to wait. I know you want it now, last year, 3 years ago. But that would be until we know, we may waste a whole lot of money because you pave it, gutter it, and then they have to come in and tear something up to make this happen. And that's the problem, is we don't really have a good engineering plan for this project yet.
maybe to appease your mind. No disrespect. The water that's coming in, you're gonna say it's gonna get faster to the drains. That with the project before us without pumps. But as, again, it'll get faster to the drains, but once those drains are closed and the can goes out, you're gonna have the same effects as you did 5 years ago, 2 years ago, or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
And now you've
So,
got,
yeah,
now you got brand new asphalt and
Right,
curbs
and as the mayor
to
said, what are you really getting out of it except waste? Or possible waste? So you're not losing anything by waiting another 8 months. Hopefully, we don't have a horrible storm, but if we do, we do.
What are other people's thoughts in terms of where to put it?
When you're saying the water's gonna go faster to the drains, and on Ninth Street, if I remember correctly, there's no pipe changes on that street, right? No increased pipe. So we're not increasing any volume that's going to the drains. So why are we saying that the water's gonna get faster to the drains?
Through the street gutter. So on the surface,
Okay,
so it can get there more efficiently.
It's
Now,
not
the-
permeable either because it's fresh asphalt.
right,
You're gonna have
right.
new Miami curbs.
so,
that's, I think that's a minimal thing though,
right.
just saying.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
not gonna really
Mhm.
change much. But it's gonna be nicer, the streets are gonna be nicer, the gutters are gonna be better, all that.
But the
Right.
effects are gonna be the same. If they.
Yeah, once the water gets there.
Yeah, once it's blocked, it's blocked.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I think he said that, option one would probably be the best approach. All the costs, as the mayor already said, are very, very similar. It's just a matter of talking to the homeowners and see. Anybody, for example, on option one, where you're going through their pavers and all of that, those people aren't gonna be thrilled. Pretty sure. So,
Well, and the other item is, are we going to consider the undergrounding of the controls?
Right.
Because those people may have objections if there are pipes growing out of their front yard.
It wouldn't be pipes, it would be a control panel.
It's just, oh, okay, because that thing on I went to look at 22nd Street and they were
Mm.
pipes.
It's just an electrical panel.
Electrical conduit to a
Yeah.
power panel.
Yeah, there's
Probably
there's
seen
no,
it.
no plumbing.
You're probably seeing like a 3-inch conduit for wiring.
Maybe that was
May
it.
not
If
be
it was a
as
big stainless steel thing and it was
Yeah.
about like,
Yeah.
And that one's way bigger than what we're talking about
Oh, it
because
is.
It is.
it's
It's
for
much
the
larger.
full sewer system to push sewer.
You see some of them boxes on Golf Boulevard, they're getting ready for the undergrounding, those green.
yes.
They're gonna be smaller, it should be smaller than that.
Oh, good. Well, here, I took photos. So tell me what this would look like. So I only took 3, but there were 3 different types of boxes. There was a older green one, a brand new green one, and a stainless steel thing.
You're probably talking about something like this, only a little bit bigger, taller. Unless you wanna get his expert opinion. Cindy, you're probably talking about a box that size but taller.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the middle one.
And how tall do you think?
It'd be a thin panel. Probably about yay. I mean,
Okay,
it can be, we can dictate the size and the height on that, but typically it's at a worker comes up. So, he's gonna open the panel.
Mhm.
So there's just those types of OSHA.
oh, so it could, because these are low.
Yeah.
Oh,
All this is an access box for maintenance.
And the goal is to just keep it higher than the water will ever rise up into it.
oh, well, that's a reason.
Because if you do a one that's underground, there is a maintenance issue. Over time, things do wear out.
Just like your air conditioning unit has to be up so high.
Okay,
It'd probably be about the same as your air conditioning unit in the height. Cause you got a slab up.
so how about the 7th Street estimate? That's in there. We gonna do that as well? Is that the plan?
7th Street.
I think this is only 9th tonight.
Yeah, but he has the costing over here for 7th Street. Or do they all say that?
now 7th Street is on here.
Yeah, 7th Street's on the back.
7th and 9th.
Okay.
7th Street is more. I don't know why, but
Well, I only see one option for 7th,
That's correct. Yeah.
and there's,
Yeah, I mean, 7th Street is the wet well in the park area,
okay.
so, and then the discharge out. And that can be, the same as the others, the force main. It can be higher and,
That project's relatively simple because there's only one option.
that's it.
Mhm.
And the cost of that one is
highest one.
Basically 600,000.
close to the same price. So we didn't get a nice drawing on that one, but I guess it's not necessary. We like pictures.
We do.
No, not
Grant
drawings for
There
7th.
was a 7th Street drawing in the agenda packet.
Oh, wait a minute, maybe on the back side. There it is.
Yeah, it's called 7th Street details.
I see it.
Again, they're all close in price, but why is 7th Street a little bit more? What's more complex there?
Touching the numbers.
You got a street that's already been done. we're working off a street that has it's gonna be opened up. 9th Street, you're getting your street redone already, where 7th Street was already redone.
So this pipe going to the well is a brand new pipe from the street. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, that makes sense. It looks like a long run too. And it's going underneath the boat ramp driveway. These, the three lines next to the well.
that's an existing storm discharge.
Storm what?
Stormwater discharge, that's the big line, that's the county line.
Okay, all right. It's nothing for us.
Right.
I see. Well, I like the location. Questions, comments? No? Okay, well, I think we've run out of questions. It's just a matter of you guys, girls, going and speaking with your neighbors and finding out what everyone would like to do.
If I could ask Attorney Mora, how can we do that? Is there any way that we can do that together?
No.
But we have
No.
to do it separately
Very simple answer. No, do not do it together.
or have
You
a public meeting?
Well, we can have a public meeting. The challenge that you face with a public meeting is the public is not compelled to engage in your meeting. And whereas, if you're in friendly conversation with other residents and property owners in the community, you're free to speak with them individually. You and any other member of the council cannot do so jointly. You also cannot use third parties to do, could not do directly.
Sure.
So you could not say to, please let me know what you think. I hear that you're gonna have a conversation with Councilmember Mora. When you meet with Councilmember Mora, come back and tell me what he says.
Yeah.
Can't do that either. And I'm not suggesting you would, but just to define the contours of that. But you are free at any time to get the feedback of your constituents, property owners, anybody else who you're interested in discussing policy issues with, as long as you're not doing so in the presence or indirectly with your fellow.
And what about city manager Riefler? No problem there, right?
There's no issue with you individually meeting with the manager Riefler or by way of example, on the sign code meeting with me directly on an issue. But again, I would not meet with two of you at any given time on a policy issue or serve as an intermediate.
I mean, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 homes impacted by this. And I mean, that's it. That's the only people that really would need to be asked about it.
Yeah, if it's option one, there's really only two. And then if we look at it, the one across the street, that's one. Maybe we can identify who that is.
You're really looking at the one guy with the pump. I mean, that's the guy that's gonna have the box.
So when the pump is running from a noise perspective,
Oh, thank you.
would any of the homeowners possibly be concerned about that?
But it's quiet.
Shouldn't, but I can verify that with the pump manufacturer as
Okay.
far as the decibels and the sound of what they would hear.
Well, and interesting, related to that would be when it's not working, is there any sound?
No,
When the pump's not running, there's nothing that you hear a hum from power or anything like that?
no.
Okay. Because if it's running, we'll all be thankful that it's doing so.
I have a feeling you won't hear it at all because it'll be underwater.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Okay, any other questions or comments about this before Mr. Flutie goes home and has a nice evening?
Thank
It's
you.
been great.
I appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you.
And, this is a great presentation. Thank you for answering all of our questions. Thank you for showing him how to use his computer.
Yes.
And,
I don't know how much I say thank you.
All right, well, now we're on to, general business. Do we have, anything that,
Oh,
the council would like to
I
discuss?
apologize. Can I ask one more question?
No, you're all out of questions.
I'm sorry.
Now go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can you give an example of another community that has implemented a similar pump and what their experience has been?
Shore Acres. I don't know if they used MWI, but they put pumps in their system.
Yeah.
And if they were massive flooding, they've had nothing, but now they got dry. When I say dry streets, they got wet streets when it rains.
Didn't we see Fort Lauderdale was using them?
Yeah, and he gave us that, I forget the community, he showed us, which was always underwater.
Oh, from MWI?
10 years.
I think I was North Shore. I got it, if I remember it right.
Shore Acres too had.
Yeah.
In St. Pete, Strikers in St. Pete. Yeah, they flood a lot. I think they still do, but I know some people that live there I can ask.
My therapist was telling me, because she heard me talking to the assistant chief about it. She says, we put pumps in. She says, we don't have any flooding.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe where she lives.
We always had water in the, either in the house or in the garage or. Yeah.
We're good.
Good, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Councilmember Elliott, you did?
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry about
all
that.
right. Thank you, Mr. Flutie.
Thank you.
Okay, general business, does anyone have anything that they would like to discuss? I have one topic that I would like to bring up, but give you guys the opportunity first.
Just any update on the candidates to be appointed potentially to the council?
Well, funny you should bring that up because that was what I was going to discuss. As far as the three candidates go, I'm struggling with electing any of them. And the reason why is because I look out into the audience and I would think that at least one would be here right now, trying to get used to what we do and learn about city business. And whenever I look back, I have to ask the question, how many have ever participated in anything that we do?
The city, right?
Now, I will admit that we do have a city council member that I pretty much drafted her because I knew that she would be a good candidate or a good fit for the council. At least I hoped that she would. And that worked out well. But I look at this council and I see that we're working out well. We're getting the job done. And I'm just wondering if really there's an immediate need to fill any more seats.
Can anybody at this point in time, so let's say somebody else was interested, we have to have a special open.
We're not open for applications at this time.
We are not. Okay.
And so the reason why I bring up the appointees, right now we have 3 actual elected municipal officials on our council that they actually knocked on doors. They got to know the community. They actually came in and sat in on meetings. They followed what was going on. They were very active, and at the will of the people, they were elected. If we add 1, 2, or 3 more, those are people that the citizens did not select. Again, I don't see any of them here tonight.
If I might add one thing about that with Mr. Wellings. I think his plan had been to be here. And his father died yesterday.
Okay.
So
knew he was sick.
I'm sorry to hear that. Going back though, prior to suddenly having an interest, and I suspect that maybe you were drafting him. But
Actually, no.
Okay.
I said.
He attended
said
some meetings before that.
He did, and
Okay.
he told me that he had, I'd mentioned that I had been in favor of the bond issue and had spoken to that and had spoken to the fact that let's look at this and
Okay.
evaluate the whole project. And he says, yeah, I know, I was there. So he attended that one also. So he's been
So
involved.
there's been a few that he's actually attended.
Yeah.
Okay. And the three candidates, have any of them served on anything for the city? Any of our committees or boards or any of that?
No.
Okay.
They're all three great people. I mean.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not challenging their
Yeah.
personalities or anything like that. I'm just, what I'm trying to do is I'm just asking the question, are we doing the right thing? I really have a problem with three people walking in that, okay, let's say maybe two have not really done anything and really have had no prior exposure or interaction with city business or even paid attention to it until now. And is that really what the people that voted for us would want us to do? And so that's what I'm gonna leave you guys and lady with, that I'd like this council to leave this meeting and put some deep thought into what's the correct action for the council. I definitely have a major struggle with taking three people and just filling three seats, because now we've got 4 unelecteds and 3 electeds.
Well, right now, we can't fill 3 because the charter amendments all went in, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now our charter says 5.
Well, it doesn't go into effect
Oh,
until
no.
November of
That is
'26.
at a different effective date.
Yeah.
We do not have to fill all 7.
Right.
We don't even have to fill the 5th. We can continue down the road that we're on right now, which is actually working out pretty well, or we can add another and maybe that'll work out well also. But I think that, I think it would be a mistake to fill all 7 seats with a majority that's not elected.
And I've had some citizens talk to me about that, and more than 1 or 2 felt the same way. But here's a question then. So let's say we don't pursue any of the 3, just as an assumption. If we had somebody that checked all the boxes, that just approached any of us and said, you know what, I'm interested in doing this. What mechanism do we have to put into place to open up a window for people to fill out applications?
It requires us to designate an open and closing time to
Okay.
accept applications.
Okay,
We don't really even have to do that, do we? I mean, the council has the sole
No.
discretion.
Not necessarily, you're correct.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily
Yeah.
have to do that.
Mhm.
You have the discretion to accept candidates at any time. Thus far, we've been establishing periods, qualifying periods, but we can solicit on an open basis and state by, anything received by the state will be considered. There's nothing in the charter or code that specifically requires us to repeatedly reopen narrowly defined time periods.
Yeah, some of us on council love these resumes, which not saying that there's anything wrong with,
right.
exploring the guy's background. But she lived here, we could put her on, well, we couldn't put her on council. No disrespect.
She says,
But we
no
could put
way.
him on. He said no way to anything. But we could put him on, during a council meeting, is what I'm saying, with.
But we would have to, Randy, we would have to say, we're opening it up to some period down the road?
No,
Not necessarily. What I was suggesting is you may wish to have a date certain that you're, like, if you're soliciting application
Okay,
and written materials, it's helpful to have a deadline for people to timely submit those.
got it.
But there's nothing that specifically says you have to open it for 7 days, not to exceed this day and that, like, it's not that strict. You folks, you 4 are defining the process and however you wish to control how you appoint people. I would, the lawyer in me, Member Bankert, has to caution, of course, you could apply, appoint somebody provided they're, and if we can certify that they're a qualified elector and otherwise. But, and that's why we require the materials, is so your clerk as your supervisor of elections can authenticate that they are in fact a resident, they are in fact a registered voter and otherwise qualified to serve. But beyond getting the information necessary to establish that they're a qualified candidate, and I mean qualified like base legal qualifications, at that point, it's your process.
Okay.
Now, I will also say, just so that you know, that I greatly appreciate you being on this council and you're working out awesome. You're asking all the right questions. You also saved the day because we did not have anyone and business would have stopped. And so I applaud you for answering that call, and I'm truly grateful that you're here. Every time we have a meeting, you definitely add a lot of value to this council. And so,
Agree.
Hey, Dave, didn't I say that I stayed on? Come on.
I'm tired of petting on you.
Then just screw up.
I was just wanted to spend more time with me.
That's, now you just left it out to the public. That's the only reason I stayed on.
Okay, so do we want to have more conversation or do we just want to add it to the next council meeting and see where the chips fall? Because
You're the chairman. What do you want to do?
Well,
I would like to wait. I would like to wait on bringing in another council member.
if I could take 30 seconds, to just add some thoughts. And one is, thank you for your comments, as well as the fact that recognizing that we're doing well. This is good. It feels really good that we can be collaborative. So that's great. I did want to, since you mentioned recruiting, I just want to clarify that point because when we first had our stalemate and we realized the importance of the 4-member quorum as well as a 4-member and therefore unanimous vote, I had issued a letter to the citizens through the email system. And I think you guys were included. That was my first letter. So you guys were included and probably saw it. And it emphasized the importance that we have more people, because I think that's where we were at that point, is what we wanted to have. So that's when Anders responded.
I see.
So he came forward on his own.
Okay.
And it may have been in response to that letter. It may have been because he was already thinking about it. I don't know, but anyway. So secondly, as we think about ties, obviously that's an important matter. So having one more or another would help with ties. But also as we consider the quorum, I think all of us have busy lives, things are going on. We're all committed to being here and being present at meetings twice a month, but that is a lot of planning around things and things do happen. So what might be helpful for the quorum, if we either have more clarity or maybe some loosening in terms of physical presence. So what can be done, and can an ordinance be changed, or is this a charter issue, or can something be liberalize the physical presence and have more flexibility about virtual presence? And it could even be, no more than once a year, or no more than, so many.
We have
so
unlimited,
many.
we have unlimited now.
For individual members, we have unlimited to the extent of, is my recollection as well.
Yeah.
Though I'm always going to give you the caveat, but I want to check what it's in writing. That's my recollection as well, Member Bankert. The physical presence requirement is one for the physical quorum. So one member can be absent, or depending on in your current composition, one of you can be appearing remotely. So you can't go out of town the same time Frank's trying to go to Philly and then us have a meeting, right? For example. And that doesn't come from the city's ordinances. Candidly, I don't think it comes from any law I can show you in writing, because what the Sunshine Law requires is that we have an open and public meeting, And the way that the Attorney General's office has opined and articulated that that should be enforced requires a physical quorum. And there is some like law review articles out there saying, well, where's this? It's being read into it, but it's not explicitly there. It's been read into it in the sense that then the public can't see what are the off-screen elements, and especially in the yesteryear of conference calls, we can't see what other things you're looking at and what you're doing and who you're talking to off mic or whatever else. And so in the interest of the Article 1, Section 24, interest of everything happening out in the public, that's where that comes from. But again, there is some division of opinion on that. What happened in COVID is it really came to drive the message home that everybody agrees we're bound by this, because every community was relying on executive orders from the governor to waive that requirement. And as city, town, village, and attorneys and county attorneys, we were saying, hey, I wouldn't advise you have one unless we've got the executive order still in place that's waiving this physical quorum requirement. But when you go to Chapter 286, you will not see it written there. It is the way that the state has, and not even necessarily the courts, but the state has opted to enforce and interpret it. And then as the lowest on the totem pole, we say, well, if that's how they're interpreting it, I'm not going to be the one who says, let's try it without and take the challenge. But I will tell you, I think even one of my colleagues wrote a law review article on this in the early 2000s saying this isn't really there. And in modern media, it shouldn't necessarily be a requirement, but it's preserved as part of the spirit of the Sunshine Law in making all of the affairs of the council transparent and visible to the public. So that's where that physical quorum comes from. That's not from your charter. That's not from your code. That's from Chapter 286 Sunshine Law as administered.
That's how,
Yeah, and as it stands right now, whether you're online or if you're just, one of us is just not here, we still have a quorum and we're in good shape. If two of us are out, I don't know if I would actually, I'm just not sure how I feel about it, you know.
It's not a
We
quorum.
postponed meetings before because we didn't have a quorum and we survived. Okay, we couldn't meet this day, we'll meet next Monday. I think we've adapted pretty well and I don't really see a big issue in it. I don't think
What is our quorum right now?
three.
It's always been a majority of the council.
That's correct,
These things got conflated, but it's always been a majority of the council. So
right?
for every moment that you've been for, a quorum has been 3. The question was, what does it take for you to do official acts? Because if 3 of us gather, but we can't vote on anything or do anything, why are we gathering? Was sort of the division,
Right.
right? So, and the word quorum is just what is required to gather lawfully. But then there's you have this heightened requirement. Now it is, you only need a majority of the council to take official acts, not 4. So now if 3 of you have a meeting, you can meet and you can take official acts. That's what's changed, is the
And
ability to
the
take
majority would
official
be
acts
2 of the 3.
because of the charter.
And when I got on council, and Dave got involved with Lynn and I think Kyle, because our sound system was deplorable. If you did it by phone, you couldn't hear nothing. I'm telling you, it was bad. And I don't think we should even allow it back then, but.
No, it was terrible.
And
Oh, my God.
he attacked it. And now I think it's just, you might have maybe a 2-second delay, but I mean, it's crystal clear, you know?
Okay,
And I will caution all of you that the only hesitation I'll have for you folks appearing remotely is if we're having a quasi judicial hearing and there's a concern that you will not be able to receive the evidence presented. If you're saying, I want to appear by phone, well, they're going to be putting on maps and displays for a variance hearing or something that came before you. That would be the only place where I, as your city attorney, would say, I have a little concern about so-and-so appearing remotely. Most everything you've done has been legislative, and the way your boards work, you don't get too many quasi judicial matters before you. But I do owe it to you to tell you that if we found ourselves in that posture, that might be the one place where I'm like, I don't love that.
So, you know, I'm going back to what I was originally asking was, can we put this off for a little while? And see how it's working with the council, and if we decide that maybe it's problematic to not have 5, then we open the application process back up, take a few applications and see who's best. Thoughts?
have we heard anything from the 3 candidates that filed an application? Have they called the city at all?
I met with 2.
They're still in?
haven't heard differently.
Okay,
Dave, I'll say this, like I told the other mayor, I want to work with you, all right? But if I have objections, I'm not going to vote, okay? And
Don't have a problem with an objection. That's, it's your prerogative, of
right,
course.
and that's my independence, I think that I owe it to the citizens, that's why.
Of course.
But I want to work with you, and you're the chairman, you're the mayor of the city. Manzo was the mayor of the city. I wanted to work with him. I told him the same thing. He says, if you don't agree with something, please don't vote for it, but give me a debate.
Stay true to yourself and stay true to your core. And, that's all I ask of any of you.
So if you want to delay it, I don't have a problem.
Everyone else okay with that?
with the understanding that if we could still bring any or all of the other three candidates back if we wanted to vote.
Someone would have to, put it on the agenda and a motion would have to pass.
Okay.
And the candidates would have to still be interested at whatever that later.
There might be other candidates.
And there may be others as
Yeah.
well, correct.
Yeah, that, I mean, if they decide, if someone decides that we want to, open that back up, then all I ask for is that we open the entire city up to, for people to apply.
For some period of time.
Because I want, whoever it is, if we do this, then I want the very best candidate we can get, because remember, we are electing this person, not the citizens. And that's why I just don't feel very good about it. Okay. Any other general business? Otherwise, I will ask for a motion to,
How will those individuals be advised?
Renee, could you reach out? Okay. There you go. All right, I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, aye. Everyone, let's go home.
Thanks, everybody.
Guys, at the table, council.